Previously on Lost.
This garment you seek, it looks to be in motion, moving. If you seek this garment here, may haste take you.
You inspecting the body. The puncture wounds that are in the front have corresponding puncture wounds in the back as well, and you can see clasps on the shoulders where a cloak would be affixed, but the clasps have been broken off and there is no cloak there. You go back and check and begin to pry in, and you begin to pull out small iron balls.
I pull it out and I hand it to Percy.
Well, that was quick.
I'm sorry. Guess our girl is back in our narrative.
Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 67, The Chase to Glintshore. As a reminder, I'm doing a Q&A video later this month. If you want to get your questions answered, then join my Patreon at the $3 a month tier and reply to the post with your questions. The post is linked in the description of this video. You've still got a couple weeks to submit your questions, and I'll answer as many of them as I can in a video. The Patreon is also so important to help me have a more solid safety net, so if you sick days, don't risk completely derailing my livelihood just because I missed some YouTube uploads. It sounds like a small thing, but it honestly helps a tremendous amount. So if you're able to support the channel at any dollar amount, it honestly means the world to me. Now, on with the show. At the beginning of the game, we learned that Vax, Vex, Grog, and Keyleth have all hit level 15. Scanlan and Percy are a bit behind them, and Pike is unfortunately pretty far behind. That's the problem with XP leveling. It isn't really compatible with the modern playstyle of Matt's campaign, but that's kind of a larger discussion for another day. The game opens in Mr. Sasharu's hideaway. She's dead. Her body is riddled with bullet holes. Vex reminds them there was an alarm on the door set by the murderer as they left. They should not stick around here. But they're also trying to figure out the big question. How did Ripley find out about the vestiges? Keyleth checks Percy's gun, which used to be Ripley's, and discovers a subtle enchantment crafted into the white stone grip. It's enchanted. Now, there's a cool clue here from Matt. See, the Mr. Sasharu has been dead for about a week. If the party did the math, they'd probably realize that Ripley listened to Vox Machina's conversation with the Sphinx back in episode 49, heard about all the vestiges, and went straight for one of them herself. She probably decided she couldn't get to any of the vestiges in alternate realities, and probably decided against the Titanstone Knuckles, which were in the hands of a Goliath and under the nose of an ancient black dragon. So that didn't leave her that many vestiges on the list. But that being said, there was a second vestige that would have fit that criteria. Percy and Vex check the room again. Now, they're rolling investigation checks that were already rolled in the last episode, but they probably forgot that some checks gave them the information that they received at the end of that episode. That being said, they do now know something they didn't when they first arrived, that Ripley is responsible. And so now they're trying to figure out how many allies she has with her. Now, typically I don't allow a new investigation check unless circumstances have actually changed, but I would say that you could make the case that learning who is actually responsible for the crime could qualify as a big enough change to justify another roll. But also, it's a new session, and sometimes that might just be a good enough reason to allow a new roll. Anyway, Vex rolls a natural 20 and concludes that there were probably 5 or 6 people with Ripley. They spread the dust of tracelessness to hide their own footprints, but this also erases some of the evidence of the intruders. They leave through the secret passage, cut through the sun-cut bazaar, and return to their rooms at the Debt's Respite, which is run by the same faction Mr. Sasharu belonged to. They hide the gun in one of their rooms so it can't listen in on their conversation. Then they go to the other room, and Keyleth uses some of Ripley's old notes to scry on her.
Your vision pierces above. You can see your consciousness thrust through the clouds and just white clouds passing by. And then your vision comes back down through the clouds, only instead of the desert, instead of the mountains, instead of anything in the nearby area, it's just ocean. Just ocean.
She's
Forces,
another one.
Waves, sea, endless around you.
Oh no.
You emerge once more, your vision moving before, only now there's a torrential rain surrounding you, lightning, thunder, clapping. You are in the center of a very, very heavy storm that is tearing across this ocean expanse. A boat creaks. Ropes swing and you hear voices yell, a crew barely holding it together. Standing on the deck, hooded, you see Ripley, calm, and looking out into the horizon. She smiles from beneath her dark leather cloak, a shimmer of blue energy dimly crackling across its inner lining. A voice yells, "Nothing yet!" And her eyes dart up to the crow's nest, then back down to her weapon. A handheld firearm of sleek design, but familiar function. 6 barrels.
Oh, snap.
Lightning flashes once more in the distance, followed by a very, very nearby crack of thunder. The boat, this for a second as a wave passes under and it catches itself again. She runs to the deck to look out across the crashing waves. And the vision fades and you come back.
That was magical. That was hard.
And so now the party has to figure out what their options are and what they're going to do next. And I know this is going to sound weird. Believe me, I know. But genuinely, this is one of the Critical Role scenes I love the most. I love this scene. I go back and watch it all the time because I really enjoy watching them figure out whether they can catch up with Ripley or not. Because here's the thing. She's heading for Whisper, the dagger, which is in a shipwreck in the Ozmit Sea. Their only clue is that it's near an island of glass. Now, once again, Matt allows his players to roll something they've rolled before, which is to try to figure out what this island of glass might be. He allows Scanlan and Keyleth to roll for it. Keyleth because the water Ashari live in the Ozmit Sea, and Scanlan because Matt tends to believe that, as a bard, Scanlan should be the one to have a lot of this information because he's traveled all over collecting stories and legends for his songs. And now, Scanlan is able to recall information that the party wasn't able to recall in their previous vestige discussions. The island of glass must be the Isle of Glintshore. Now, it is a little bit hard to believe that Scanlan hadn't made this connection before, and now he's able to do so without any real difference, without any real prompting, but the reason Matt allows another roll is, well, for one thing, as we discussed earlier, it's been several sessions since they last rolled for this, so telling the players, no, you can't know where she's going because you rolled really badly 3 months ago, is not going to be very fun or satisfying. But also, it's actually important to Matt that his players figure out where Ripley is going. He's presenting his players with a quest, not just to get 2 vestiges, but also to finally deal with Ripley and grant Percy some closure.
She is the worst person I've ever met.
Why would you say that exactly? Because we've met a lot of terrible people.
People don't frighten me.
Their dad.
He doesn't frighten me.
Sandor was pretty shitty. Clarota. We've met a lot
But
of
let's not
terrible
rank
people.
the bad people we've met.
But that only works if his players know where they're supposed to go. So thus, there is no reason not to allow another roll to try to figure out that the island of glass is Glintshore. But knowing Ripley's going to Glintshore isn't the same as being able to get there themselves. Keyleth can't scry on the island if she hasn't been there before, so she can't find a tree to transport to, until Ripley actually gets there. And there's no guarantee she'll actually get close enough to the island for Keyleth to see a tree through the scry spell. Especially because the way Matt runs his scry spells, he describes them very differently from rules as written. He doesn't give his players a ton of info about the subject's surroundings. That's all presented as out of focus compared to the target. But instead he shows the pathway to that destination, so you could argue that he's debatably giving his players a lot more information to help them figure out how to find their subject, so it is kind of a trade-off that works better for the way he runs his games. So until Ripley reaches Glintshore and actually stands near a tree while Keyleth has happened to be scrying on her, they can't use Tree Stride to reach her. And they can't use Windwalk to get to the island because there's nowhere to rest along the way, it's in the middle of the ocean. So they can't beat Ripley to Glintshore. And that leaves 2 options. Either chase Ripley down, or try to go for the next vestige. Not all of them think they'll even be able to catch up with Ripley in time to stop her from getting the second vestige, so they're wondering if it's even worth trying, versus focusing on a different quest and getting a different vestige. Now, I mentioned this briefly in the last episode, but in some of the recent scenes where the team has tried to figure out their next move, Grog has been visibly bored. And I get a ton of comments that explain that this is just a consequence of Travis playing Grog's low intelligence. Since Grog's intelligence is only 6, these commenters argue that Travis might want to contribute more to these planning scenes, but instead, he's playing true to his character's limitations, and that means he can't suggest ideas. And not only is this not true, but I also think it grossly misunderstands how Grog's intelligence plays a role in the campaign. Because mostly it's used as a setup for jokes, but there's only like 3 or 4 times I can think of across the entirety of Campaign 1 where Travis or Matt decide that Grog's intelligence means Travis can't do something that he wants to do. And when the group is sitting down and discussing strategy, Travis is absolutely still able to contribute as Grog. And we can see that in action all throughout this scene, where he is deeply involved in this discussion.
Well, we can... Yes, Grog?
Aren't you 2 dweebs always wanting to, like, steal an airship?
Yes.
Don't
Yes,
they have
yes.
one here?
Yes.
We're not going to catch up with
Do I have
them.
to say the third thing, or are you going to get there with?
I would
Sadly-
like to steal that airship, and even then, though, it would take
It'll
us
take way
a
too much
week.
time. We are on a schedule. And we have
What,
to
road trip, bitches?
But if we're in an arms race and she's on top of another, maybe we should head to the next that's out of her reach now.
That makes sense to
Soon.
me.
Staff is...
Well,
The staff is in the
The
plane
abyssal-
of the abyss.
That's a very scary place.
only
we
problem
need-
with that
Yeah.
is she only has 1 now. And if she has 2, she might be a bit harder.
Especially, imagine
I
if
know, but when
one of us was wearing all of the vestiges.
She's slow moving. She's on a boat. It'll take her days to get wherever she's going. We just need to find her, and we can keep scrying on the airship and just catch up to her slowly. She's a slow moving target, even
I like
after
that
she.
you're assuming we'll have an airship.
We Don't
could
right
take
now,
us-
but we will soon.
It could take us a while to even get the airship.
Nope, one day. Me and Percy.
I
Maybe 2 hours.
I actually agree with that strategy. It is a bit like fish in a barrel because she is limited by her speed.
Will we be able to find her in the middle of the ocean?
We can keep scrying from the airship.
That's true.
We can keep scrying.
We can keep scrying on her. As
The
But how
first
will
thing we
we
have to do is remove this enchantment, and
Correct.
I'm very open to ideas on how to do
Wait,
that.
but just play it out. How do we see where she is in comparison to a giant body of water?
Well, we use what sailors do.
Look up at the stars?
stars.
In the stars, right? Or,
We
or
scry on her at
scry
night.
at night.
Scan
We're
one.
looking at her, right? Not up.
Yeah.
Could we like
No,
go
you can
like
scry
that?
up, yeah.
Are either of you
Just
gentlemen
focused around the target of the scrying.
Are either of you gentlemen
can't just,
smart
like, go-
enough to do that?
I can't tilt the camera up a little bit.
I can.
We know where she's going. We know
We do.
where Glintshore is roughly. If we got
You
a
know where
local,
that island is?
well, we can find a local who does, a sailor or something who can help us navigate our way there.
Maybe somebody in an airship.
We could, but we might just be chasing. As long as we're all right with that, we'll just be
Just-
chasing.
We'll keep scrying until we see if she's found it.
Until we see a
and
tree.
then we make our decision.
Max
It's
does have a point,
what?
though. If
What?
we're just chasing, we could get the jump on other ones.
Nothing Travis says in this scene does anything to deny Grog's low intelligence. He's not sitting here doing anything except asking relevant questions and making connections. This is the thing that a lot of people in this community seem to fail to understand about Grog's low intelligence. It is the source of a lot of fun shenanigans, and it sometimes plays a role in important role-playing scenes, but the minute it gets in the way of Travis's ability to play the game and makes his experience at the table less fun, that means it has outstayed its welcome. The same goes for back when Grog was able to describe the letters he saw in the Sphinx's riddle. So many people seem to think that the reason Grog didn't immediately describe the letters is because Grog can't read. But that doesn't make any sense because he just recites the letters on his next turn anyway, and it's not like he got hooked on phonics in the 6 seconds between his turns. So once again, because I keep seeing this narrative come up, I have to push back against it. If you believe Travis's ability to play the game is being held back by the way he roleplays Grog's intelligence, most of the time, you're wrong. It does happen once or twice, but generally speaking, Matt and Travis are very good about keeping Grog's intelligence as a joke that Travis can play into, rather than a hindrance that keeps him from being able to play the game. And look, here's why this matters. I'm not just trying to win an argument against a few random commenters. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. I'm trying to push back against a pervasive idea I've seen pop up a lot in this hobby. Because I know there are a lot of players and GMs who see Travis having fun playing a low intelligence character, and they get it in their heads that that's how players at their table have to play characters with low stats. And so they'll do what Matt and the other players hardly ever do. They'll insist that someone at their table is playing wrong if they don't play into their low score, and that means that they can't do certain things because of their low scores. And this Critical Role scene is honestly one of my favorites for a lot of reasons, but one of those is because Travis is able to contribute as Grog and help figure out what they're going to do next. And if his DM or his group did what so many other D&D groups do and dictated how he could play the game and how often he could say something smart, then I think the scene would be impossible. And that would be a huge shame. Now, as they're discussing this conundrum and they're trying to figure out what to do next, Liam asks a fantastic question. He asks how long it's been since they left Draconia. And this is terrific because, just like in the last episode, this is a moment where Matt doesn't need to put the pressure on them to speed things up and consider their time frame, because the players are doing that themselves. Which means they're aghast when Matt tells them that it's been about 4 or 5 days since they left Draconia. And then when they don't believe him, he shows his work. They took a long rest after leaving Draconia, then they took a long rest outside Ank'Harel, then they took another long rest after the casino, so not quite 5 days, but definitely longer than the party thought. Now, it would probably be better if he'd been tracking the game on a calendar. If you're going to track time in your game, you should have some records of it. Just makes it a lot easier. But it's not the end of the world that Matt doesn't do this. Still, Matt Colville has a great video about that and the value of tracking time in your game. I would definitely check that out because it's really valuable if you want to have long-term ticking clocks in your campaign, like this one with Draconia's deadline. Now, as they're discussing their next steps, they agree that they need to remove the enchantment from Percy's gun. The folks at the Crystal Chateau could probably do it, but Percy doesn't want to work with them. They want Whitestone, and Percy doesn't want to give them any, especially right now, considering how many of his secrets have already gotten out there. But Treve and his organization could probably help them find someone who can deal with the enchantment. And that brings up another question. Do they tell Treve about Mr. Sasharu's death?
Mistress Asharu, the dead girl.
Yes.
She worked for...
Okay.
She was part of a organization?
Yes.
Maybe they would want to help us because of revenge.
Here's the question, and this is what I've been thinking about sitting here for the last few minutes, is either way this is terrible, is either we don't tell them and leave town and eventually they find her and she's got strange holes in her from some strange thing that could possibly be a thing that a man with white hair who breezed through town a week ago was holding. Or
But
we
he saw
go
you
and
fire off a
Or we go
shot.
and tell them, and I cannot believe this is about to come out of my mouth, that it wasn't me. It was a one-armed woman who had
A fugitive?
an identical, thank you, weapon of this one-of-a-kind weapon that no one bloody saw.
Now, at a certain point, it does kind of seem like the party isn't sure what to do. They want to get this enchantment off of Percy's gun, that's the first move, and Treve might be able to help with that. But beyond that, they're not sure whether to go after Ripley or not. They're not sure if they even can. But once again, credit to Travis. He knows when one of these conversations has gone as far as it's going to, and when they're just starting to spin their wheels.
Oh, we getting the gun unfucked or what?
Let's go downstairs and talk to her employer.
So they go downstairs and tell Treve that they figured out where Mr. Chisharo lived, checked on her, and found that she's been dead for a week. Treve takes a coin and taps it casually on the bar a few times, like he's fidgeting as he hears this bad news. But that's not what was happening, because suddenly everyone in the tavern sobers up and stands and watches Vox Machina. This bar isn't just owned by someone from Masharo's organization, it's a full-on front, and everyone inside is a member. Keyleth realizes nobody's going for weapons because all the tables have little cubbies with weapons stashed in them. The party describes Ripley's appearance as well as her alternate form as the old woman from the Dungeons of Whitestone, and Treve recognizes that description. That's who hired the mistress last. And this old woman had 5 allies with her. Treve agrees to let them leave and go hunt her down. He just wants her good hand as proof that the job is done. They can also call in a mage to help deal with the gun's enchantment, and this mage can be there within the hour. While they wait, Percy sends Grog and Scanlan to go get an airship, so they can follow Ripley to Glintshore. Percy says he's sending Grog to make sure the captain knows what they're signing up for. But we talked about how Travis might sometimes get bored or distracted. Well, this is a gift from Taliesin to Travis, and to the rest of the table, and to the audience. Because pairing up Scanlan and Grog for a mission basically guarantees some shenanigans. There are 2 skyships docked at the skyport, and Scanlan and Grog find out that one of the ships is spoken for, but the other is available to be chartered. And this is actually the ship they flew from Iman to Vasselheim. And as they inquire about the ship, they're reunited with Captain Damon. The players are like, wow, what are the odds? But Matt clarifies there are only like 6 commissioned skyships in service. This is still a relatively new technology that actually originated here in Ank'Harel, and also half the cities Vox Machina has been to don't even have skyship ports. So the odds of finding Damon here were actually pretty good. Scanlan flashes Jamon's badge, and as soon as the clerk at the skyship port realizes what this is, she happily reports to Damon that any charges involved with the passage will be covered by the palace. And then she starts writing off a whole bunch of other provisions and supplies as necessities for this passage, even though I get the feeling that a bunch of them are not going to make it onto the ship. You gotta respect the hustle. Scanlan and Grog tell Damon to be ready by the morning, and Damon says they can be ready within the hour. This sounds small, but it's actually a vital addition from Matt, because his players seem to have it in their head that they're not going to be able to stop Ripley from getting Whisper before they can. And they're right. But that doesn't mean that Matt wants them to not even try. So he makes sure there's nothing actually stopping them from leaving immediately if that's what they want to do. And that's really important because they have been kind of on the fence about whether that's even what they're going to try to do. So he's saying, no, you can go do it. You can leave right now. If time is a factor, don't let the airship slow you down. On their way back to the Death's Respite, Scanlan takes a quick stop at the casino. He uses his hat of disguise to look like Walter White from Breaking Bad, goes upstairs and uses Dimension Door to enter the room where they made the deal. But it's not Rutter's office or anything, it's just a private room you can rent for business meetings. Scanlan poops in the room and uses the poop to write "The Meat Man Cometh" on the wall. But while he's in the casino, Grog, and the player Laura Bailey, encourage him to play a little bit. He loses, and we see Scanlan just mutter how much he hates this place. He asks about Rutter, and they say that he tends to drop by the casino every few weeks. Matt explains that much gold is a big deal to most normal people, indicating it's going to take a while for Rutter and the half-elf to blow through their ill-gotten winnings, so to speak. But also, Matt is clearly eager to get this show on the road and get the party to Glintshore. So he gives Scanlan a dead end, so he can't find Rutter right now, because if he did anything else, it would probably lead to an extended sequence that Matt probably wants to hold off on right now. He implies that once all this is done, he kind of expects Scanlan to come back to the casino and take it for all it's worth, and maybe get revenge on Rutter, but right now, the group's focus is on other things, so he closes off that avenue to Scanlan. Speaking of which, we cut back to the tavern, and the rest of the party talks to Percy, who is clearly beating himself up about Ripley still being on the loose. Vax keeps insisting, come on man, get the job done, don't lose your head. Be the same cold-hearted badass we know you can be. And I can absolutely see where he's coming from, although I'm also not totally sure that's what Percy needs to hear right now. But as they discuss Ripley, we hear how Percy describes her, and it makes it perfectly clear that Ripley is Percy's arch enemy, way more so than the Briarwoods ever were. She is his evil doppelganger, and Percy describes exactly why.
Do you know how every now and then I say something just awful? I love you both very much for that. When I think of that terrible person inside of me, I see her face. She has a very active imagination. She knows how to make these machines. And her imagination terrifies me. If you knew that that was me, would you let me live? If she made 10 more of these things? Has she made 100? Does she just hand them out to people? Maybe, I don't know, maybe she's just running around and torturing people's parents and siblings to death and then handing them a gun and kicking them out into the world to see what will happen, because it could be funny.
You're probably right, Percival. She probably is.
He asks the party to destroy his notes when he dies, specifically because he's worried about exactly this scenario of his plans getting into the wrong hands. But he also tells them that he's working on another invention idea that could be used against Ripley and could be used against the dragons, but then it has to be destroyed so nobody else has a chance to use it against anybody else.
You know you can talk to us, right? You never share ideas with us, and...
I do. I told you my idea of killing all the Dragonborn to start a war between the dragons.
All right, well...
That's why I don't share those ideas. I'm not proud of them.
Is this thing you're building going to kill a lot of people in addition to the dragon?
I hope not, but it could. It could make it very easy to kill a lot of people.
One day at a time, gang. Let's deal with Ripley.
Let's deal with Ripley.
Now the party reassures Percy that Ripley getting away last time was not his fault. And Percy says, no, that's not true. He knew in that very moment that she was worse than the Briarwoods, and she would cause a lot more death and despair than they ever could. Vex reminds him, no, the Briarwoods are trying to summon an evil death god. They were worse. You did the right thing. But Percy didn't know that at the time. None of them did. Percy got lucky that he correctly chose to confront the greater evil, but he chose selfishly, because he wanted vengeance and he didn't care about the consequences of Ripley staying alive as long as it got him what he wanted. Anyway, at this point, Grog and Scanlan come back and report their success. Free airship, and we can leave whenever we're ready.
And on the way back,
like kinetic or something.
I won back the 50 gold I lost on the soccer.
You did?
Yeah.
Well done!
Yeah.
You went in?
So I'm going to leave Marquette totally evens.
That's great.
Oh, that's amazing.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I wish I could say that.
Oh, cheers to that.
Cheers. Cheers.
Still bet 1,000, this guy. Unstoppable me!
And at this point, Treves' contact arrives, ready to remove the enchantment from Percy's gun. And remember, Percy had the chance to go and talk to someone from the Crystal Chateau instead. That was an option available to them. But he didn't want to go to them, so instead the mage is someone from the D&D equivalent of the black market. And as a result, Matt had to invent a character who essentially represented the consequences of this choice. It wouldn't feel like this choice had consequences if Treves' contact had just been another elderly mage or stoic girl boss wizard. So instead, this mage is the type of person you would specifically only get by going through an underground network of spies and assassins. What would that guy be like? Well, Matt chose to describe this character, Kine, as immediately off-putting, sketchy, and paranoid.
Kind of shifty-looking guy, with kind of a rather pointed nose, very shallow features, and he's just kind of like hands are together. He has like a satchel over his shoulder, these kind of long, plain-looking robes, and his thinning, short, dark hair is like slicked against his skull. He has this kind of thin, kind of mustache goatee right there, and he's kind of sitting at the edge of the bar talking to Treve.
So he looks totally trustworthy.
Totally trustworthy. As soon as you guys walk downstairs, he goes,
That picture of you on the carousel.
basically, yes, but with a shorter, slick hair.
I'm glad that's a thing again. I was really.
I don't know how to take that, actually. Based on how I just described the NPC.
Depending on the strength of the enchantment, I could take anywhere within the next few weeks.
Can I get you a drink? Are you all right? Do you?
Why? Why do you ask?
Can I insight check him?
Make an insight check, yeah.
I can get rid of the enchantment immediately, but it's gone. Transfer, that's a time. It's taking process. It's much more expensive than what I was promised as part of this contract. Ah, I see what you're talking about.
He starts glancing. Shut up!
See what I mean? This character represents the consequences of Percy's choice not to trust the headmaster of the Crystal Chateau. You don't want to go with the classic, reputable folks? Well, fine, then you get the weirdos. However, Kyne learns that this enchantment is an audio-only scrying spell that essentially constantly transmits to another receiving device. So they ask Kyne to dispel it, but Percy has one last thing to say before they do.
And you, if you can hear me, and I get the sneaking suspicion you can, I'm not ignoring you anymore.
Kyne ends the enchantment with a flourish. Vex pays a little bit extra to have him identify the T-set, and they finally learn that it is a T-set of envenoming. Also, the fact that this NPC is named Kyne is kind of funny considering how much it sounds like a Kynan. Either Kynan is on Matt's mind because of reasons, and when he improvised an NPC name he accidentally made it similar to Kynan's, or Matt is deliberately referencing Kynan to essentially remind Liam about him in preparation for these upcoming reasons. Either way, it's kind of fascinating. Percy goes shopping for materials to start building a small cannon and cannonballs. Matt says there are magical cannons in the world, so he can use one of those as a base to create a mundane version of the same weapon, which is a really nice way to handle a big project like this that would realistically take weeks to create, so that way you can just skip all that stuff and boil it down to what will essentially be a couple of skill checks to try to make his own version. Meanwhile, Vex flashes the badge to get some free healing potions from the local peacekeeping forces, and she buys some more from the local shops. She mentions she would have haggled, and Matt just has her roll to see if she can get the prices down, but they don't turn it into a whole role-playing scene, and that is great behavior from both Matt and Laura. After she shaves a few hundred gold off the asking price, Scanlan asks her to give him that gold. He's joking, but it's enough for Laura to justify Vex feeling curious or suspicious, and so Matt allows her to roll an insight check on him. And she realizes that Scanlan is struggling and just wants to leave this stupid, unlucky city. They all finish their prep, they board the airship, and take off. Once they're on board, they size up the crew to make sure they're trustworthy, and they actually discover that their navigator, the one who knows how to get to Glintshore, is the halfling girl that Vox Machina spared after the Wyvern attack. She was one of the attackers, but Vox Machina encouraged Damon to hire her on and give her another chance. And so Matt is demonstrating that they were right to feel that she was trustworthy because now she's a valued member of the crew. And that is a great detail from Matt. It's a nice way to show the impact of Vox Machina's mercy. The next morning, they scry on Ripley and see that her ship is near an island, sails down, parked in place, and Keyleth watches as Ripley and 5 allies take potions of water breathing and dive into the water. And just as she discovers this, the airship is approaching the storm that Keyleth saw in her scry from the beginning of the episode. Captain Damon says the clouds are too high to get above the storm, so they all just need to hang on to something. Matt is preparing for an encounter. If I had to guess, this is going to be a skill challenge to avoid getting knocked off the ship as the ship cruises through the storm. But Keyleth is absolutely unbothered. She just tells him just fly straight into it, because she just leveled up. And so now, she has an 8th level spell. She can control the weather. So Matt just rolls with it immediately and describes how Keyleth stands at the bow of the ship, catches a few bolts of lightning with her bare hands, and blasts the lightning back into the storm, clearing a 5-mile wide span of clear skies around them. And this is a concentration spell that lasts for 8 hours. So he just describes that 6 hours later, they clear the storm. Easy as can be. This is kind of a huge lesson to keep in mind when you're running games for high-level characters. There are going to be some challenges that they can simply, literally wave their hand and get rid of with a single spell. Now, granted, this was a high-level spell, and that's what those are there for. They're meant to get rid of problems. But there are probably some GMs out there who would go, oh, well, the spell lasts for 8 hours, but it'll take you 10 hours to get clear of the storm. Oops, I guess you still have to do my skill challenge. If I'm honest, there are absolutely days where I've been that GM. Sometimes I might push my players towards the stuff that they should be able to bypass because I think I know better than them. And there are times when you do need to do that in order for the players to still have fun, although you want to be careful anytime the players use a high-level spell and you end up making that spell useless. That is not a good feeling. But regardless, this is absolutely not one of those times where it's more fun for them to still go through the challenge. Here, it is more fun for the players to completely bypass something that should have been a big challenge because Keyleth is using a high-level spell. So that makes them all feel badass, and that makes all of them feel like they're growing in power. And that is valuable because the entire premise of the Chroma Conclave arc is you got messed up by these dragons, go find these vestiges to essentially grind in the wilderness for a while, and then by the time you've got all the vestiges, you'll be strong enough to fight the dragons. And so a scene like this helps demonstrate exactly how much power the players have gained, and how capable they've become. And so that's really helpful in helping to reinforce the feeling that they could take on these dragons before too long, something they have historically been very afraid to try to do. This helps push the story forward. Also, it's D&D, it's just fun to cast spells that make the weather not a storm anymore. Sometimes that's fine, just let them do cool stuff. At least that's what I believe. Anyway, they clear the storm and fly low above the archipelago, keeping an eye out for Ripley's ship. As they approach, they settle on a plan. Fly over the ship, Keyleth drops down onto Ripley's ship in her Keyleth form, as she becomes an earth elemental and lights her hands on fire, becoming a flaming ball of rock. Then the sailors will have to swim to the shore, and the players can handle the rest of them from there. As they approach Glintshore, they see some smoke trailing from a beach, probably a campfire. This is Matt's way of telling them that Ripley's time underwater is over. They've already made it to shore. When they're 10 minutes away from the ship, Keyleth starts scrying on Ripley. As the spell concludes, she sees Ripley's face, and there's a spark of blue, and then nothing. Ripley resisted the spell. Now, she did so just by rolling high on her wisdom saving throw, but Matt threw in the spark of blue to hint that the reason Ripley was able to resist the spell was thanks to her magical cloak. As they get close to Ripley's ship, someone casts some sort of magical flare from the deck of the ship, presumably alerting Ripley and her allies on the shore. The airship opens fire on Ripley's ship, and Vax flies over with Keyleth, and Percy watches through his scope as a spellcaster on the deck prepares to cast something on Vax and Keyleth. But Percy's able to fire a sniper shot and drop that guy before he gets the chance to do anything. Vax drops the key to her, and she punctures through the ship, causing it to begin taking on water. Then while she's on the ship, she grabs some notes and papers from the ship and then makes her way to the shore, where she meets up with the rest of the party. The shore of the beach is made of glass, just like the rest of the island, and Matt tells them that they have to move at half speed, or they can move at normal speed and they'll take a point of damage for every square of movement. They find 2 boats on the shore and a campfire that's about 5 hours old. And again, this is Matt's way of foreshadowing that Ripley didn't just get to the shore a few minutes ago. She's had plenty of time on the island. And now, thanks to the flare, she's been alerted to Vox Machina's arrival. And that's where the episode ends. Hopefully the party is thinking about just how dangerous it's going to be that this genius-level supervillain has had a few hours of prep time before the party even arrived. But we'll find out next week when we discuss episode 68, Cloak and Dagger, one of the all-time great Critical Role episode titles, by the way. It also contains one of my favorite combats from this campaign, though I'll admit that's a pretty long list. I really like this campaign. And if all is going according to plan, this video came out on Monday, and we'll be talking about episode 68 on Thursday. And maybe also there are going to be some other videos in between now and then. Stay tuned to find out. And by stay tuned, I actually mean like and subscribe and ring the bell, because that's how you can actually get the notifications for when I drop new videos. You can also help support this channel by joining my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Supporting me at any dollar amount honestly helps a lot, and at just $3 a month, you can submit a question to my upcoming Q&A video. You can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date with all of my latest news, including bonus videos like the ones you might be getting later this month, maybe even later this week. We'll see, but that's the plan. And just a friendly reminder, it is election season, and just pointing out that Trump did say that we need just one violent day to combat crime, which sounds like the premise of The Purge, until you look at the context and actually becomes clear that he wants a violent day of cops going after citizens, which is less The Purge and more Kristallnacht. He also said immigrants are murderers because they have bad genes. He tends to say a lot of Nazi shit. Maybe he shouldn't be the president again. We talked about how to handle some high-level spells in this video, but if you want to talk about whether or not you should ban any spells in your games, check out this video here. Until next time, play fair, and have fun.